From downstate to the city and the suburbs, we have live team coverage of this very busy 2022 primary election.
We begin with the GOP governor's race, and CBS 2's Tim McNicholas live at Darren Bailey headquarters in downstate Effingham. Tim.
Senator Bailey is actually still here in this room talking to supporters, and he just told an excited crowd of more than 300 people that he is actually pleased with his results in the Chicago area. One of the first things he said in his victory speech was, "Let's hear it for Chicago." He also said he views this as a win over the establishment, and the crowd erupted when Bailey said his advice for Governor J.B. Pritzker is to, quote, "Start packing, friend." I just had a chance to talk to Bailey. I asked him, what makes you confident a blue state like Illinois will want to elect a conservative governor?
Simply with my message that, as I spoke tonight, Illinois is a lot worse off now than it was 4 years ago. It's a lot worse off than it was 40 years ago, and it's time for something different.
And Bailey went on to say he is fully prepared for Pritzker and Illinois Democrats to spend tens of millions of dollars trying to keep him out of the governor's office, which no doubt will happen. They have already spent big bucks in the primaries on attack ads against Richard Irvin. Live in Effingham, Tim McNicholas, CBS 2 News.
Tim, thank you.
Now let's go to CBS 2 political investigator Dana Kozlov at Richard Irvin headquarters in Aurora. Dana, not the night that he wanted, giving a lengthy concession speech.
Yeah, he did. He spoke for about 15 minutes, Erica. He spoke to supporters at about 8:20 tonight, about 100 supporters or so, just a few minutes after the race was called for his opponent, Darren Bailey. He was gracious, but he also issued a call to arms for all of his supporters to rise up, he said, and defeat Governor J.B. Pritzker in November. Pritzker is who he blames for his primary loss.
I wish Darren Bailey well as he moves on to the general election. I wish him well. And listen, I hope this governor is wrong in his assessment that he can easily defeat the opponent he paid tens of millions of dollars to face. But if this governor is correct, and if he does easily prevail, we as citizens must rise up.
Irvin there referring to the $30 million that J.B. Pritzker and the Democratic Governors Association spent on anti-Irvin ads. Now, after his 15-minute speech, Irvin personally talked with and hugged many of his supporters who was here, but he did not speak to any reporters. He avoided them, something he'd done pretty much for the last 5 months during his entire campaign. Folks here wrapped things up very shortly after Irvin left the stage, and most of the people who had gathered here tonight at the former Aurora Public Library were out of the building by about 9 o'clock or so, disappointed, but again, listening to Irvin tell them to rise up and get out and still support all Republican candidates in the fall, but it's going to certainly be an interesting November. I am live in Aurora. Dana Kozlov, CBS 2 News.
Thank you, Dana.
CBS 2 investigator Dave Savini is live for us. He's been covering Governor J.B. Pritzker's campaign tonight. Dave?
So the governor's opponent, Darren Bailey, had a message for the governor that he's going to start packing his bags. He needs to start packing his bags because he's going to be fired on November 8th. Well, the governor had a message back that he's prepared to beat what he called Trump's candidate. And he also had a lot of other visions for the state of Illinois. This is what he just said a few moments ago.
I'm J.B. Pritzker, and I'm going to beat Donald Trump's candidate for governor, Darren Bailey. Someone who seeks out and accepts the endorsement of a racist, misogynistic, homophobic, xenophobic, twice impeached former president does not deserve to come anywhere near this state's highest office.
So he spoke of infrastructure upgrades, fiscal repair of the state's credit rating, balanced budgets, the legalization of marijuana. He also spoke of his leadership during the pandemic and reproductive freedom, were all of the key issues here tonight. Bailey is the candidate he wanted to face. He pumped millions of dollars into ads for Bailey. So this is the matchup he wanted, and he got it. Live at the Marriott Marquis, Dave Savini, back to you.
All right, Dave, thank you.
Let's bring in our panel. They've been with us all night on CBS News Chicago. Pat Brady is the former Illinois GOP chair, and Kimberly Agoin is a political analyst for WVON Radio. Thank you both for being with us.
And first, let's turn to the governor's race in here. Actually, not a big stunner from what I understand from both of you, because we were seeing this unravel, particularly for Irvin on the Republican side, with $50 million being poured in. Pat, he didn't win.
Yeah, I think it was 55, and that's the biggest waste of money since the Bear paid off Jay Cutler's contract. I mean, they're 0 for 55. It was an absolute disaster. Horribly run campaign, did a lot of damage to the Republican Party all around. So a real bad night, I think, for Republicans in that regard. But congratulations to Darren Bailey. They ran a grassroots campaign, and they won. Question is, can he win in November, Kimberly?
I don't know if he can. I think that he has marginalized an area of the state. He wanted to get rid of Chicago as far as being a part of the state of Illinois. Now, it sounds like he's trying to make amends with his speech. And one thing that will happen now, we will definitely see his running mate from here on out. We will see Stephanie Trusso, an African-American woman. J.B. Pritzker is also running with an African-American lieutenant governor. That will be a very interesting dynamic.
You mentioned the speech. Let's listen to a little part of it where he has some work to do with Chicago, and he sort of admitted it.
Let's hear it up for Chicago tonight. We got anybody here? Right there's how it's going in Chicago. God bless you. Wow. Thank you.
So how the tables have turned there. He said it once, but we heard it over and over again just in the first few minutes. So how does he balance that, having to reach out to Chicago, but still very close to his base, particularly with the endorsement of Trump?
It's going to be interesting. I'm sure there may be some people in Chicago as well who did vote for Trump. Not a lot, but that's going to be his audience now. And
I can guarantee it wasn't a lot.
Yeah, that will be his audience now. But also what will be his audience are people in the city of Chicago who think that the amount of crime that we have seen since 2020 in particular, the crime waves, especially in downtown Chicago, north side of Chicago, areas that were not experiencing anything like this, they are looking for someone, they're looking for change. So that is someone else who will probably be sympathetic.
Pat, what is the impact on this with this governor's race on the Republican Party? You mentioned the $50 million spent on this, and normally that'll buy you an election, right?
It's the most they've ever spent.
What happened?
It was a horribly run campaign by a bunch of out-of-state consultants who didn't really talk to anybody here and tried to shove Richard Irvin down Republicans' throats. I mean, we were talking about before, he didn't even meet the media afterwards. It was going to be a TV commercial campaign. And they got creamed by J.B. Pritzker's team. And they should have anticipated that, because Democrats aren't just doing that in Illinois, getting themselves involved in Republican primaries. They're doing it all over the country. But as a Republican, I think the Republican leadership needs to recognize that the party is now controlled by the more far-right elements, the Trumpy elements of the party, and the moderate people need to recognize that they can't just ignore them anymore.
So if we talk about the highs and lows of Pritzker here and what he is going to have to prove going into November with Darren Bailey on the other side of that ticket, I know we talked before about some of his big triumphs, the economic hole that the state was in, but what do you think are going to be the things that are pulling him back that people are going to be looking at in addition to the issue of crime?
Well, he's going to have to make the people see as rosy a picture as he sees. A lot of this is about what have you done for me lately? And he had a wonderful legislative run as far as getting things passed, et cetera. But he's going to have to convince people that there are better times on the horizon, and he's going to be the person to bring that to the communities.
The other aspect of this, and it's an interesting element you both seem to think is going to happen, and that is he's either going to run for VP or president, you think?
I really feel he is. I think that you don't go to New Hampshire unless you are ready for that, and to have that type of platform at this time, and also the platform he had during COVID-19 where we had a regular standing date with him every day, 2 p.m.
I think, though, the Achilles heel for him is there's a disconnect between the unicorns and fairies speech he just gave and what people on the ground actually feel about Illinois with gas prices, crime, the taxes. So it's not as rosy as he's portraying.
But they might be in fear of Darren Bailey also.
Which is a good point. That's what I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, that Darren Bailey might have a good message on those issues, but is he the wrong messenger?